The 1930s in America were defined by the Great Depression, a period of profound economic collapse and social despair. In the industrial heartland of Cleveland, Ohio, this despair took on a physical form, festering in the ravines and shantytowns that housed the forgotten and the destitute. It was here, in the shadow of progress, that a predator began his work, leaving a trail of dismembered bodies that would baffle investigators and haunt a legendary lawman for the rest of his days. Cleveland in the 1930s was a city of stark contrasts. It was a bustling hub of industry and commerce, yet it was also home to deep, neglected pockets of poverty. The most notorious of these was Kingsbury Run, a sprawling, brush-choked gully that served as a vast, unofficial encampment. This was a transient city within a city, a place where the jobless, the homeless, and the hopeless sought shelter in makeshift shanties. The horror began quietly with a grim discovery on September 5th, 1934. Two young boys playing near the East 55th Street yards stumbled upon the lower half of a female torso, carefully wrapped in a piece of high-quality wallpaper. This initial find was not immediately recognized as the work of a serial killer. It was seen as a gruesome, isolated crime. However, a pattern soon emerged with terrifying clarity. Over the next 2 years, more remains were discovered in and around the run. The killer's signature was horrifically consistent. Victims were decapitated and dismembered at the major joints with what appeared to be surgical precision. The method was not merely violent, it was clinical, suggesting a knowledge of human anatomy that would become a central and terrifying facet of the investigation. As the body count grew, so did the city's terror. By 1936, the killer was operating with brazen frequency. The victims, often referred to in police reports and newspapers only as the tattooed torso or the female trunk, were predominantly male transients from Kingsbury Run. Their anonymity became the killer's greatest shield. Without names, the police had no starting point to trace their final days or their connections. The killer's methodology was chillingly meticulous. Decapitation was a constant. In some instances, the victim showed signs of being drained of blood. In at least 2 cases, the heads were subjected to boiling, a possible attempt to destroy identifying features like fingerprints or dental records. This level of post-mortem manipulation pointed to a killer who was not only organized but possessed a disturbing, clinical detachment from his horrific actions. Public panic began to simmer, fueled by sensational newspaper headlines that dubbed the unknown predator the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. The police were overwhelmed. Their investigations were hampered by the transient nature of the victims and a complete lack of witnesses. The killer operated in a void, preying on those society had already forgotten, leaving behind only anonymous, mutilated remains. Into this maelstrom of fear stepped a man whose name was already legend, Eliot Ness. Having recently been appointed Cleveland's Director of Public Safety, Ness was famous for his Untouchable squad that had helped bring down Al Capone. The public and the press saw him as the one man who could stop the butcher, placing an immense weight of expectation upon his shoulders. Ness brought a new, aggressive energy to the investigation. He ordered a massive dragnet of Kingsbury Run, rounding up hundreds of transients for questioning. He utilized emerging forensic techniques and consulted with noted pathologists. In a remarkably forward-thinking move for the era, he even enlisted the help of a psychiatrist to develop a profile of the unknown killer. His most controversial action came in 1938. In a desperate attempt to deny the killer his hunting ground, Ness orchestrated the systematic burning and bulldozing of the shantytowns in Kingsbury Run. Dozens of makeshift homes were destroyed, displacing the already destitute population. It was a drastic, heavy-handed measure that highlighted the immense pressure he was under, but it yielded no concrete leads to the killer's identity. The investigation produced several compelling suspects, but no one who could be definitively linked to the crimes. One prominent figure was Dr. Francis E. Sweeney, an army surgeon with a known alcoholism problem and a violent temper. He was a relative of one of Ness's political rivals, which added a layer of political complication to the investigation. Ness reportedly took Sweeney to a hotel room for a multi-day, unofficial interrogation. According to accounts, Sweeney taunted Ness, seemingly enjoying the cat-and-mouse game and displaying a deep, unsettling knowledge of the murders. However, without any physical evidence to connect him to the crimes, and with Sweeney checking himself into a sanatorium shortly after, a prosecutable case could never be built. The core problem remained: the victims. They were society's invisibles. Without identities, establishing connections, motives, or alibis was nearly impossible. The killer had chosen his prey with cunning precision. The lack of modern forensic tools like DNA analysis, combined with the killer's meticulous cleanup, meant that even when suspects were identified, the chain of evidence was impossible to complete. As suddenly as they began, the murders attributed to the torso killer stopped. After 1938, no new victims bearing the unmistakable signature of the Mad Butcher were discovered in Cleveland. The terror had passed, but it left no closure in its wake. The case ground to a halt, not with an arrest, but with an exhausted, frustrated silence. Theories abound as to why the killings ceased. Perhaps the killer, like the prime suspect Dr. Sweeney, was institutionalized for an unrelated reason. Perhaps he died, moved away, or changed his methods. We will likely never know. The official investigation was a catastrophic failure, resulting in 12 confirmed victims, with potential connections to many more in other cities. For the city of Cleveland, the case was a profound trauma that exposed the dark underbelly of the American dream during the Depression. But the longest shadow was cast over Eliot Ness. The man who had stood untouchable against organized crime was ultimately defeated by a lone, phantom-like serial killer. While he had many successes in cleaning up Cleveland's corruption, the torso murders became the defining failure of his career, a mystery that would haunt him until his death in 1957. The identity of the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run remains one of America's most enduring and chilling unsolved mysteries. It serves as a grim lesson in the limitations of early 20th century forensic science and a stark reminder that true evil can often hide in the plain sight of human despair. The case endures not for its resolution, but for the profound, unanswered questions it left hanging over a city and a legend.